Again, Rinpoche, Tashi Delay. Thank you for these precious teachings on the precious Garland. And we've been very fortunate to have Dr. Tenzin Muchung translating for us these past 3 weeks in Katrina's absence. So thank you so much for your very clear translations. And welcome to all our online participants. We're happy you can join us. And since this is Tenzin's last translation for us, you'll find information in the chat box about how to make an offering of gratitude for his translations. So the link for the prayers is also in the chat box, and we'll begin with those now.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn, Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
뭐야? 뭐야? 다음에 가서. 내가 조지 반대 어디서送来了? 내가 천대입니다. 말을 가서. 천대 윤통사. 천대 윤통 시제 넘버 망사. 천대 윤통도写了 시제 넘버 망. 세장 지점 메시메. 제가 저버서 때도 있는데 체제도 된대게요 말아. 제 세장 지점 메시메. 낭배 출라 오만을 받았어. 낭바도 추다 오만이这些呢그 오만의 예체제 통제 추디 샤샤 위사라 예체 투고 있어라. 낭배 출라 오만을 받았어. 랑기 더바 당도 롱샤하세. 어디 인데고 지단 군자불이나 시리 마부여를 시고야 마부여를 장고야 마부여라 개바잖아. 따이나 소속은 더바 가리나 쪼데 가리나 디디 장고를 마도 그 강가 장차에 메스코란 나요 말아. 어디 인데 천년도 시제는 봐마. 세세선 지자메시베 낭배 출라 오만을 받아 랑기 더바 당도 롱샤하소래. 어디지 람나야.
So we begin with a verse from Atisha, who wrote that this life is extremely short, and also the objects of knowledge is so vast, and moreover, the lifespan is uncertain, and therefore death can come any time. And since that is the case, that one should extract the essence or engage in what is most meaningful, like a goose that extracts milk from the water, leaving the water and extracting what is really the essence of the milk. And similarly, since the objects of knowledge that we can actually engage with is so vast, we should likewise in this very short lifespan, engage with what is most meaningful, what is very the essential nectar-like.
오야, 네 당가라서 쳐번데지. 소소소 삼다이더라. 근데 쪼디께와 심마테리아. 하다미 최주베 땡겨버리지 토야데라. 데베쪼. 어디 인데고 대체도 니리니리 메시나리아. 니시안에 처방에다 펜바투게. 돈다 기부 총을 겁서 셰베. 니리니리 메시나리아. 니시안에 처방에다 펜바투게 삼로다. 아니 잠바다 뉴질라 소바 검제 뒤소체 아니 데이터를 아니 기본 중에 상로 코알랑에 반중에다 다음에 봐 동반이 공에다 기부 침배 상로를 로장에 두샷 야고요다 어 단대 버 쪼데 니리니리 메체나라 미기 주바 교화주 대수투에 들려 니리니리 메체나리아 소소소소 지샤당체 디야게도 이 데이터를 교화치마 rim바를 땡주미도 교네 아니 기본 중이다 기부 챔ber 람도들을 로그인섬 대체도 단단해네 코알랑에 반중에다 지와 동반이데 장주심에서 바꾸면 근데 또 주체에 소치오라 랑인데가 당도나네 어디랑에라 야들
So similarly, what is the most essential for us in terms of what we can do is on a day-to-day basis engage in practices that are prescribed for the persons of the three scopes, right? Because all practices can be incorporated into any of these practices that can be described as practices pertaining to the persons. So, for example, with regard to the person of small scope, which is not just kind of isolated for the person of small scope, but this is also in common with other scopes as well. So this becomes the foundation. So therefore, like refraining from 10 non-virtuous actions, engaging in activities, body, speech, and mind that benefit other sentient beings on a day-to-day basis by basically being mindful or being conscientious on a daily basis, like almost like counting at the end of the day, how many voices kind of actions that you have done for the day, and how many non-voices actions you have done for the day, and so forth, almost keeping an account. So this is how we practice mindfulness or conscientiousness. And then on top of that, on top of this fundamental moral ethics of refraining from harming others and engaging in activities to benefit others, then we also kind of reflect on renunciation, the unsatisfactory nature of samsara or conditioned existence, and how and what the means to kind of gain freedom from samsara or transcend it. And that is basically through uh, reflecting on the teachings of emptiness and so forth, which is basically kind of the fundamental practice pertaining to the person of middle scope. And then you also, based on these two kind of foundations, also reflect on bodhicitta and so forth, which is basically all the teachings pertaining to the person of greater scope or great scope.
뭐야, 대도 다 된다. 저기 말라다 메고 완전 토야 땡케를 시켜오라. 뒤인데 그 니리니리 메제나리아 기부 총을 남날로 장제. 되니 가서래. 예송 비통에 삼에다 떠서 대소리 깨먹고 아니 기분 dengi 라다 메고 만 토야리아. 기분 dengi 람티티시 삼르다. 로까지 삼다네 삼다. 대대체를 안에 기분 dengi 람티 또 삼다. 기분 첨부 람데 삼다. 착진지고 이름 망유 가리에나 고 착진지 삼다데나 이 메지 코라나리아 꿈지 체르 네버 체르 로고야라 어때 인디다 어디 삼다고로 마도 남사다가 지 꼼차르 지셔다가 베트 또버르지 규리 때니 메다르 시비치 차야 삼다 요마라 딜레라 요마로 한 요르부 꿈지 chen 용고로 마도 남사한테 니마샤라다가 멤버스라나 시체 또버하고 지셔 말도 가래서는 미디쇼 들어가지고 공부셔 쳐라. 튼저디 신의 사버서 그야시라. 어디 인도 가서라. 길에 삼로 차정에 제당게나. 근데 매주 코로나를 교회 삼로도 쇼셔르셔는데 뭐 처르셔 빠자 샤비어라. 사변 샤비어라. 시초비어라. 때 빠자 가제네 샤위네 때 뒤더러 남사 또 받기 시우제 때마다도 레시 오마라. 공기에는 고진 주어도데 가라서 하고 해가라. 샘리 주어도데. 어디 선생 가르쳐 오래. 이제 삼르다 고그래 마도 남사하다가 똑바로 시켜네. 시우시 용해 삼르다 시우시 배치제. 아니 버루시 개 용하면도 좀 탕쳐야지. 년가 요라. 이만 저 랍저 친구도 어디 야본도. 니리 세장 메테 쩐두 삼스. 니마카세 저 치고 좀 칼라이시라 마텐 베세지 사모가 집에 깔래 잡으려셔라. shumatane kebe kobande namle chega namsa keba da to wajuli kega samlutana segora shumatane kebe kobande tendre de la chia me un eso tipe asa chada chore te ko de bana shi namsa tuye yo mara sumba chui jun shi ten shi an sa chui jun na shi ko kale sa ma ke ma cheba cha ma do chona ani nuwata yo gura o te samle sha gura ya o ti silana.
So basically, we have to generate some sort of certainty or confidence that we will not take rebirth in lower realms in the next life, because if we do, then we lose the foundation for any kind of higher practices, right? So that should be our first spiritual kind of objective, is to engage in actions that ensure us rebirth in higher rebirths in future lifetimes. And so that is basically, for that we have to reflect on the causal conditions that give rise to higher rebirth. And that is basically on the teachings of refraining from the 10 non-virtuous actions. So on a day-to-day basis, we reflect on that. It is very important to do that, right? Are we consciously, intentionally refraining from killing, from stealing, from like all of that, right? And so that one sort of practice that we should do every day, a kind of a living a intentionally ethical modern life, one that is basically defined by refraining from negative actions. And then based on that, then we reflect also on a day-to-day basis. Teachings pertaining to the personal middle scope, they basically meditation on renunciation and emptiness and so forth. And then also on that ground, we should also reflect on not just like achieving liberation or nirvana for oneself, but for all other sentient beings through training and bodhicitta and so forth. But what is most important here is basically to do this practice on a daily basis, on a sustained basis. The trick here is to do it in a sustained manner on a daily basis. It is never the case that realization happens suddenly, we kind of sort of expect that sometimes, we engage in a few days of serious kind of practice, and then we kind of expect for some sort of sudden, transformation or inner realization, right? That is never the case. And that is because even though we may have glimpses or insight into all of these spiritual practices, including emptiness and so forth, our conditioning from many, many previous lifetimes is so strong that if we were to measure our kind of virtuous states of mind and wholesome states of mind and their strength and the strength of our habitual negative tendencies, the strength of our habitual negative tendency far kind of outweigh our positive kind of thoughts and positive potentialities, right? So therefore, continuity is extremely important. Sustained practice on a daily basis, kind of what we call as kind of guided meditation through all these kind of teachings pertaining to the person of three scopes on a daily basis is very important, because only then we can basically change, fundamentally transform our negative tendencies and kind of overpower them with wholesome tendencies or wholesome positive thoughts and potentialities through such sustained practice. So that is very important. Some scholars thus mentioned this, this particular verse. For some people, when they pursue a kind of spiritual practice or any kind of field of knowledge, they say even by forgetting to eat on a day-to-day, even by forgetting to eat for the day, they engage in this kind of extreme effort to achieve something, right? And they expect that as soon as they engage in this kind of endeavor, they expect to become a scholar or expert in that field, right? And he says that nothing whatsoever is achieved by such approach or by such person, and so therefore one should engage in an effort that is sustained like the continuum of a river.
Da tanda ko nyeri mete samluta society churab karchine samluta o tamde lawa dire yabu chonso kewate ti tube chonso parcha sha tosun taba tamje kimbo tobe ene karso ora mihi be member do karse na lokton chen chishena member ser so sam tarbe shitsu so sam sanje ko ban toje ne ba sha tosun sam kawa ko o tende chen ti chenane chili sosu kiwasabi yobata chochigi yobata tindre samurti legdwa o ten sosu kiwala chesu irache shangi kiwala chesu irache tindre chenani chochigi yobata samur juan dwarisa tati nawas mebishina tanga te chure chechi karchigi na hamaw chima kege chuma su toban kema su ke chuma su samsan tuchi Tinte meeting game ma boyo gudwa. O ti sonza. Tinte member che. O ta tunda kibu chungu tan trinda. Chimbi lamla ya nyiri meeting na lo changi yinsam. O di changi tunda ya. Umashi gyaba umare. Umaren ji chungu lo soba tinte kapsu. Te topchi ki topsung pa te zolia. Teba che, samba che, komba che ne. Tar tuwa sanji kuma topne. Simje tamje ki tanga chubni re. Kyo kushe yende kundenji kansa chimbuwa chagi yinsam. O te che tu tanda ne kyo nari ina se. Yende nari ina kyula kiba chigi yinsam. Kunu se tamne semba shuus. O tindu re.
So therefore, on a day-to-day basis, when we should reflect at the end of the day, we should reflect on what we have done for the day, all the wholesome, positive actions that one has engaged, and then like cultivate kind of joy in that, or rejoicing in one's virtue and the virtue of others as well, of course. And also like kind of generate kind of regret and compassion for the negative actions that we have done for the day. And then basically review one's like activities for the day, so that we rejoice on all the activities, all the spiritual practices, like refraining from the non-virtuous actions that ensures us rebirth in higher lives. And if we have done that, we rejoice in that. And if we have reflected on emptiness and based on renunciation and so forth, then like we have basically sowed the seed for liberation. And then if we have engaged in actions or spiritual practices inspired by bodhicitta, then we have like laid the foundation for our eventual enlightenment, right? So therefore, then at the end of the day, it's very important to generate joy or rejoice in all of these actions, right? And rejoicing in one's own virtuous actions and rejoicing in the virtuous actions of others, because rejoicing plays a key role in encouraging us, right? Inspiring us further on a day-to-day basis. So through these sort of practices, then we can hope to eventually achieve realization and achieve transformation. As I mentioned earlier, realization doesn't happen all of a sudden, instantly, through a couple of days of practice and so forth. So therefore, we should cultivate this intention before engaging with this text, that I'm going to engage in the practices pertaining to the person of three scopes. And in order to do that, like I'm going to reflect on the teachings taught here by Nagarjuna in the precious Garland, through studying, through reflecting, and through meditation, so that eventually I'll achieve enlightenment for all other sentient beings. So with this intention, once again, like let us all generate this intention so that we can actually engage with the text.
Oh yeah, that is all.
No.
Oh yeah. Oh dear. Me papa ne ngendro ro se de do. Tadi ka she wo de sana. Oh. Tarwa to bala ni sun bebe. Da tangi da de yu to ku de se de she do. Oh jene. Da me papa ne ngendro ro se. Le junde la so ba te zo kemele te zo me ba ma wa. Yo. Ene chi me ke wa pa ke wa chu tu ba ya. Ichi me gen te zo yena le junde le ichi me ba te le ya. Be su me she ge je na. Ene te ko te pa sa ya te zo ken jeng gu ma wa. Tinde te ene ngendro le ru de sha da. Yo chi ma te. Yo ida tendo la so ba tinde chi de sha da. Yo ba ba ne tendo do se ta le junde la so ba. Ichi che le ke wa che na. Ribu te wa da me ke wa che na tu yo. Nyiri me che na ya ko. Te pa pa ke wa tu be ya. So ya. Sam tang che. Tende le junde le che ni. Te bun ki tu la chen gen chi na. Yo ba ba ne. dendro lada mi kyo le gre shara. Yanda chi shin sta de shamba tamde tarba da tamje kemba da tende to go mara. Nge so la ma ji she kyo shima lada mi kyo to ge samche re shero. Ta tarba da tende to ba sheba ya. Ni kar go se yanda chi shin yon she che. Ni la mete tarba ni gyo she. O ti ni pa gwe ka sa la so te zo. Tarba to ba la kar che ure se ne. 아니 니라 메테세 따따따 체다 이걸 뭐도 딱시 타기다 저 공부를 때네 아니 바보에 가서도 주네 타바 토발라 넬루 로주도 야다 버치다 하신데 무슨도 또 안해 요 무슨도 또 다 타기다 저 라서 버테 좀 무슨도 또 어다 때나시 기부침을 전에 자주고 심게 근데 전에는 타바 탐지치 못하고 그래서 다된다 미기 주고 겨와 주투에 대점들 촉시지에 말했지 치마 타바 탐지치 버투지기 땡 개발지에 규점지레스 다 디톨리아니 고메 가르스나 기분 정도 첨별 남도 소리야 동반에 대 자주 섬을서 kom 그래스도 어디 접시
So we're going to start with verse number 57. And so I'm going to read it first. The nihilist goes to lower rebirth. The essentialist attains a upper rebirth. But through knowing reality as it is, not relying on the two extremes, one is liberated. So therefore, talking about that in order to achieve liberation and complete enlightenment, one has to understand the view of the middle way that is free from the two extremes, extreme of eternalism and extreme of nihilism, right? So one extreme that we can fall is basically a nihilistic extreme, which basically says that there is no rebirth, there is no causality, and so forth, right? And so if we entertain such a nihilistic view, then the result is that we will not bother to observe karma, will not bother to live an ethical life. And due to that, the effect is that one takes rebirth in lower realms. But the other extreme, but the better extreme is entertaining an eternalistic view. Not only that things exist, not only that karma exists, causality exists, but they exist inherently, right? And so with such an approach to reality, the individual observes karma, observes causality. And due to that, that individual takes rebirth in higher rebirth, right? So even though that is good in itself, it says that in order to achieve the state of liberation, based on which one can then achieve complete enlightenment through practice of bodhicitta, one has to cultivate the view that is free from both of these extremes. And so that is basically a kind of urging us that one should not be satisfied with simply practices pertaining to the personal small scope. Also, that is important, refraining from wholesome actions and so forth, negative actions and so forth. But also that, we should basically achieve liberation and complete enlightenment based on that.
Oh yeah, that did it. Yanda Jishi Yongshi Pero, Yanda Jishi Yongshi Be, Meda Yoba, Menduba, and it teacher Meba Barjuna, Chichir Yoba Medus, or that they are Tissidua, Shandagis, all that Usana, Ranshingi Mess, do any cheddar londo rese. Kena di cheda londo rashi ji mesne meba sigore ene meba taware sem tende pa shenda ngo ma to do ta chiru ba to do ba ngora sem ji ngora o te zul ba le so de ti ja do tende mar ne lu to ya da ba chi da wa shin de she ba se ya da chi shi yong she ba se de ne lu to ya da ba chi da wa shin de yong so she so na se ta ni da te u de yong so she so na se rashi ji ene Ranshingi Yobara, Nelu kasere yanda chishi yonshebe meda yobar medebasa. Tani da tewe ute chima chishin sheba inasigura. Ine yonso shebes. Meda yobar medebas. Rangshinki yoba de dewi wamare. Sawane meba de dewi wamarwa. Rangshinki mesigur mado mesigur marwa. O ti yose de tene taba tenchi deban juwatum de yoba mado. Rashi yose yoba mado. Chota. Tishir meba par junase. Rangshinki mesine meba par jurge yunas. Eni tanya do yose le jumde chachi rungwa de yose tenchi yose kelingora. Ni yoba bale jurchogdo o ti sonda yota da metal lo se ti mari yoba de nganju tongju na shi tembar yoba ti na shi samlu ta na ko yota ba ti chachi nebe le jumbe lo soba kan yo mari sana ni metal wa o ti le ma lo chi ko ma do me rang shi gi me su de che da lo ti de mari si ko ra o ti de me ta ya chi la.
So then we go to verse number 58, and this is basically Nagarjuna's response to an hypothetical question raised by realist, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, who kind of challenges this middle way philosophy by saying that if you maintain that things do not inherently exist, right, then it amounts to basically entertaining a nihilistic position, right? So this is in response to that. So so Nagarjuna's response here is that by knowing reality as it is, if you assert that, if you assert neither existence nor non-existence, and if entertaining such a view actually is a nihilistic view, why wouldn't you also call it a kind of eternalistic view, right? Because the Madhyamika position is free from both extremes, right? Free from nihilism as well as eternalism, right? Things do not inherently exist, but they do exist at the conventional level as interdependently arising phenomena imputed by the mind, or that appears to the mind. So this is basically Nagarjuna saying that when we say that things do not inherently exist, we don't mean that they don't exist at all. Because we, on the other hand, we also maintain the existence of dependently arising phenomena. That is all that kind of dependently arising phenomena that is imputed by the mind or that appeals to the mind. And so therefore, for Madhyamika, if what we are maintaining is that even though things, when we say things do not exist inherently, we meant things do not exist independently from the side of the object, inherently from the side object, right? But nonetheless, we also simultaneously maintain functionality of things, kind of an agent and action, and so that kind of dependently arising kind of causality, we also maintain simultaneously while maintaining that things do not exist. And we meant by do not existing inherently or intrinsically.
Oh yeah, you saw. Oh, don't do it. Get a meba swing was one more to Labgidwa. Oh, Mama Kira, Mene get a Yoba so Ranshinji Yoba, Ramune Yoba, Tembar Yoba, Majoton Nashi Yoba Telia, this soon Chungutuase. Teach you Majoton Nashi, the Mesa you are Wasigora. Tinde Kira, Veneka Soda. Oh, get a Yoba swing, and it 20 tiene meba lenso Kena yoba de kagit was. Te sonta tenda ane kena o me kasura meba ba trying to do this. Meba ma trying to do this. Lembas ti kan do ti trying to do this erchira. Meba ma trying to do this. Samgora ti sigora. Tatila pa lenja to homa tinde ralu. Tishi meba sun chonwe yoba ba chi ma tinde ene ngazu uma ba we tenji debar juwe ngobu chunde gi dewa te chudan debu le tene chache nebe pene ji debu chi grese ti kele gi orwa sigora chache roma te kele gi ora tenji debar juwe chache ro tishi meba sun chonwe o tishi meba sun chonwe chachi neba de yo mara se yo mara te su chane chatte je debar chonga chawa chen wa de pen de wa de yo de chunde nam sha yo de sigara te ne yoba ba ya chi chi mena kera ga to uma ba de yoba ba cho de meba ma de yoba ba cho de ti cho le ta na o ti cho le do do wa se lembas o te de se da tin de do ya what is
So then verse number 59, again, kind of a hypothetical question from the realist who agree with Nagarjuna by saying that uh, because you uh, refute existence, right? You refute, you said like things do not exist. Because you refute existence through your Madhyamika logic, doesn't that imply that, you are nihilistic? And to this, Nagarjuna responds by saying that if that is the case, we also refute nihilism, because even as we maintain that things do not have intrinsic inherent existence, but we also maintain the existence of conventional phenomena, causally arising mentally imputed phenomena, right? We also maintain the conventional validity of action and agent in a dependently arising manner, right? So because we also maintain that these exist, you could also blame us for being a kind of a eternalistic, as entertaining an eternalistic view.
this one
No?
Well, Pandita, I should do so. Ganda, Ganda, 20 many to say. Ganda, 20 many to say that. Many to Tamichashi, Michiba, say. Oh, did it. The Umaba Ganda, say, Umaba to be Sara. Umaba, say, 20 many to say. Umaba de Sigada, Umaba Kandase, Tenji Lande Meba Sigado, Lande Meba, need Kelling Marwa, Chicken Megmare, Kane Lagumare, Kelling Mare Sura, Kanda, Kanda, Tenji Menido, Ram Chidane Yomarese, Menido, Tamicha, Tamja Kelling Chigumare, and a Kane Tinde Lagia Mare Sura. Pichuchen meba yesi kanengo so lagu mare tamecha yo mare sigara tendido kanda tenji meni do tamecha shi mechebas teacher tendido ta chanju tenchere semmena yanda chidar mebar sheye sedera chanju tenchere sedera tandi karsido sena meba tamsin bachir ane cheba ba yachina lyujin yeba cheba tada lobe tayuch o chanju tenchiri semminasa talana mebe chanju la soba tende tobe chedo sigora chanju se lana mebe chanju la soba tende tobe chedo se ke melibe cheba nyamsulechina lyujin yeba cheba lobe lyuji kame ba tembeche kede yeba da kudila 어디 가래? 어디 자주 대체. 단대세도 어디 당부대 당만이대 돈다시네 어디와. 간다 된지 매니도 우마바 간다게 돈다네 레중데로 소바다 중데게 되와 팬은 되와 소바데 좀 매바 켈링이 오마레세 랑신지 매바스 켈링이 오마도 매바 켈링이 오마레세 대다 칸에는 무슨 칸에 람데 근데 예세 럽게 오마레네 담자게 오마레세 티식도 티치라다
So verse number 60, uh, since they do not actually assert nihilism, nor behave nihilistically, so that is basically Nagarjuna stating that Madhyamikas actually do not say, when they say that things do not inherently exist or things do not intrinsically exist, they do not maintain, therefore, that things do not actually exist, because they do exist conventionally. They do exist as interdependently arising phenomena, because the idea that we do not maintain that things actually do not exist at all is something that we do not actually assert philosophically, nor do we engage in that manner by not observing karma and so forth.
뭐야다 장주 땡체를 셈매나 대다 지대를 매발 시에서더라 장주 톱지 때문에 그 어디를 대서도 장주 톱지 때문에 나셔야 돼 라나 매배 장주 톱에 채도 시고라 대 람라야 안에 템베서라 라나 매배 장주 톱에 채도 대 람라 때는 람 공거라 템베서 렌데 신지 말로바 또 베셔세 렌데 신지 말로바 또 베셔 장주 톱지 셈매나 장주 톱에서도 텔 정비 와라스테 나네 매바바 컨디션 조그레세 기타 지들 매바 시에테 매바 퍼마완데 마레세도 디기도 라나 매베 장주 톱바티 때도 람단 테이블에 서버 친지 마로바 또 베세세 어디도 니케다 렌데 매베 렌데 매냠베 셈비야 매바 예세도 렌데 매냠베 셈비야 매바 예데시고라 셈매나 지들 매바 바리인데 매바 마레스 장주 토베 체도 레데를 소바 테다를 좀 베세 매바 마레 좀 요레세라 계속자 네테다 우마바 테다 지들 매바 바르 셰바르 셰바르 마레스 매바 마레스 테다레 tindido.
So furthermore, Nagarjuna counters their argument by saying that, and furthermore, because Madhyamikas actually rely on enlightenment, or they see enlightenment as a kind of achievable goal or foundation, and for that particular purpose, Madhyamikas engage in observance of karma and all the spiritual actions that lead to the resultant body and state of enlightenment or body. You cannot maintain, and you cannot assert that we do not actually have a mind that says there is no karma, there is no causality, things do not exist. And so therefore, because they rely on awakening, they do not think as nihilists. So how can they be called nihilists? How can the Madhyamikas be called nihilists when they actually depend on enlightenment and engage in all the actions that lead to the state of enlightenment through observance of karma and so forth. So not through a philosophical position, nor through their actions, Madhyamikas behave as if they are nihilist.
So, 어떤데 두주리지 다 rinyi to 되게 가르치고도서는 산제 가서 타니다 저 음마데 산제 팀무 많이 배켜줘래서 쇼남 템버메바 나오나시 템버메바 다 야 자주 누에 때지 레버서 소라 펜을 줘 어디 산제 팀무 많이 배켜줘래서 디셔도 쇼로가 니데 그 가르치고도서는 강사 풍부로 마와 예세 강사 제수여바다 풍부 템바투바 마와라 소바다 치르바다 남발에 연구를 하는데 강사 풍부로 마와에 지대 장제 우주바다 장제바다 리버젠바다 로 아니 치르바라 소바테 조시와라 지대 장제 우주다 아니 그메 셰디 샤자 그메바 치르바스스라 그메체라 게데 시세 게데 콘둘야 기와티다세 예메 데바마나 티세 동반이 니미세레 럽럽가 건제 니미세레 동반이 어제 동반이 저 가레 매 가레 여다 가레스네 탄이데 저 의디 샤싱게 요 말에서 샤싱 말에서 오라 예메 데바마나 티다 들란제 용 말에서 고고 말에서 신 말에서 오라 지질 산게 남게네 원래 어디 되지라네.
So then verse number 61 and 62 basically describes how the middle way that is free from the two extremes, extreme of eternalism, nihilism, is a unique feature of the Madhyamikas. So in order to establish this, verse number 61 begins by saying, as the worldly philosophers, and then in the like such as the Sankhyas and the Vaisheshikas and Jains, right? Ask whether they asked with who those who assert the real existence of person and aggregates, whether they maintain kind of a position that is free from both existence and non-existence. And the implication here is that, some of them say, they have their own concept of the absolute and so forth, that they say is actually, free from all elaborations and so forth, right? But ask them, whether they actually maintain a view that is free from both two extremes. Because like Madhyamikas, they, even when they maintain that things do not inherently exist, it's like an illusion, they do not inherently exist, but nonetheless, simultaneously, they were able to assert the functionality of causality, the viability and the validity of action and agent and so forth, right? Ask that caution to them. So even though they might actually give a kind of a verbal kind of commitment, they will not be able to kind of defend that thesis.
Oh yeah. That is my son do that. Transgender to the Shijan is saying set in the killing go to transgender to Sigora. Any the person there. Just to tell you. Want you should be true, but who took was at it. Oh, very sobiness can the chip sit that day. This will carry killing goes now to put him but again. Oh, Can share that chicken turn to so chita, but share that chicken turn to the soba. To the killing is Chibubala soba or to the something you don't say that you love dog on the Nimi Nasuda. Or to the Kanga Sheba de Taba Dango. Oh, Tende killing to Mato, treated the killing by this. Or do you want to shake door? Does it ready to share more go to it? Oh, should have been the dealer.
So there's a mention of three real schools here: the Samkhyas, the Vaisheshkas, and Jains. We're not going to delve into the philosophical positions of these three schools here. But just to summarize, the Sankhyas actually maintain that all objects of knowledge can be categorized into 25 categories or 25 objects of knowledge. Then the Vaisheshkas, they're actually followers of Shiva, and they will eventually maintain the real existence of external phenomena, phenomena outside the mind that actually exist, inherently exist. And then the Jains, they do commit to a position of a kind of a philosophical position that is free from subject-object dualism, right? Which sounds similar, but when you kind of analyze, then they actually maintain a consciousness that is permanent, that intrinsically exists, that is eternal, that is free from subject-object dualism. So therefore, they are not really kind of free from subject-object dualism in that sense.
뭐 저기라 다 장제바도 저 있는 거야 카르 신이 용거도 장제 라메바다 라제바셔야지 네 지단 그 장제바데 치초올 때는 강거 주변시거라 담보들이 치초 생기치월 때 뱀보레시거라 되도 주변시르시 이내 되게 정말에 끼고 요시라 제til라네 제바부 원주라서가 로요 고마르스 원주 케말로제 코란 강장비 용거 베켈링 거시도 야 딜 냠도 야 제바부 원주 게로 고체고 베서르시 원주 버시치 용거도 제디도 참 담보 정고 데카레스인데 제 치소어데레서라 뱀보지와데 되게 정말 제어레스 지대 용서데 딜라야는 지대 제바부 그 마고다 tin데 정거도
With regard to the Sankhya school, actually quite a sophisticated philosophical school, they have two kind of sub branches. One maintain a creator god in the form of Shiva, and one actually the original one. Actually, they are not theistic. They do not actually persist the existence of a creator god. But fundamentally, their position maintains that the source of every phenomena in the world is what they call as primal matter, which is basically inanimate, and everything in the universe is basically emanations of that primal matter. And those who actually believe in the creator God is that for that primal matter to be activated, they need to be a creator God, and God activates primal matter, and through the emanations, the universe is formed.
they can do Sana. Tenekare. Shine, Drome, Ome, Shesido. Jidenji Pumbu de Sigdo, she Sonsari Chigora. Don't do any casore. Don't do Ranshinki to Bayova Mare, said she said, what did Tambu de Sigo Mother, Jiden, don't do Chishi, you, Tam said. Jiden Gero, when they Pumbu La Soba to somebody. And Ramuna to what she your mother said, take a lesson. Shine, Drome, Home, Chinsido, or Pumbute, and Ranshinki, the Mebatasera. Ranshinki, you're not too soon to any Devata Mamba Tate, too soon, Yora, too soon to Ranshinki, but Nequabalati Negma, Resigoda. Oh, Shine, Drome, Home, Chinsi. Shigne to dance on cigarette there, but Shigne, draw a machines. Shig to the Shandaj return to the Tendeke or Maresugora. Shine Dome. Gay on the Shandaj in a Sulem and it's okay on Tangen of Tendeke or Maresura. 시내 롬에 오메 쳔시 깨지간에 메네바 다다와데 코란 끼그레데 깨지치냐 만주르 치코네요 말에서 깨지치대 안에 남자 시도라 교단 깽게 단다 깨고라 단남베 로체나 미선보라 제나다 신동다 메도드 제나다 선보지 때데 사실면은 중화다 대속에 단다 야코로 버체제 때고요라 내가 라도 이나 단다 르기 우당에다 나자다 지강게 우당에다 강게 단다 야 선보지 대교하는 마도 지 선셔버지 라완선 대교 말아 어디서도 이게 시내 도메 오메지 깨지잖으면 내봐 뒤숨을 자니시도 기다려 뒤숨 대배다 이제 된도 지여 담서 뒤숨도 내 대바다 다다 마음배 쓰기 랑은에 주바 템바 주바 지시여데 뭐부까요 요 말레스 때네 딱바 잠도 요 아레스 템바 주바 요 말레스 어디 뒤숨을 자니시도 근데서는 당신이 주변 뭐 기와 지시여도 요 말레스로 대연안에 두숨을 딱 저전에 지역으로 되어 말해서 대바디 신내니 신다들 터드게 랑은에 요나 그 랑은에 신내는 그 신다들 랑은에 터드르지 거기라 되어 말아 깨와데 야기는 랑은에 요나 그 깨니 신다지네 요네 야게 거야를 지워라 되어 말아 다다 내바데 trouble 내고래 되 규정이 바네네 또스게는 건직전 로드셔를 마도 요 말도 어디서도 뒤숨도 내고 왜 신이로 신의 것이든 로아 메레스 봐 계획에 그 현대진의 원하여 말레스 아니 다다와데 계지장 라게고 당분 내신 이베들 따다들아 내버지고 말고 그 규정 사업 깨고요라 뒤숨도 내버들래 당이 배송자 어디서 가가 랑신지 두고 말레스 랑신지 두고 요나 뒤숨 거버지 깨와이나 samde tende samge sara ngobra jina nga ju yugura ji kena ko koran chu tayo be soro samul ko do achida taya te ke udo aso koran ya tayo be soro nga ju tubdo ma shege sigora koran ju de so yores yo chi te yo ne ne chu tayo go re sigara tu koran one chi yo go do samge ora kuje tende so ne lubur do chuma de samul ko to go mara koran ran shin de chi yo ne te ne ju de sun de bu yo sara da ramune ke ore sara nga zo salu jamba do ka siti songto saje ki tamba ba so do za ke ro zo le salu jamba la sine salu de jamba dong se ji ke de wara tele sine ene ko tenjin de bar jo are se ti so de judan ke ko ta da ya ke ko ra ta do de ki go ra ti che ni ki go ra ma do shanda che ba bo che da rang wen da rang shin ki tu che ba ma ra ju ji so on de ko no lu bu ya ta yo go ra ba 어디 정신이 들어갈까? 송구도 하야 된대 있더라.
So then from verse number 63, it begins to, Nagarjuna begins to explain the emptiness or the lack of inherent existence of phenomena. And phenomena here, particularly the most important phenomena is our own psychophysical aggregates, because, it's kind of related to how we generate aversion and craving and karma and so forth. And so therefore, the thesis here is that the world here does not inherently exist. The world means the world of psychophysical aggregates and all other phenomena world, but particularly the world of the world here refers to the world of psychophysical aggregates. The psychophysical aggregates do not inherently exist, right? Because if they do, then they must inherently exist in terms of three times, any of the three times, right? They must inherently exist in the past, or they must inherently exist in the present, or they must inherently exist in the future, right? Three possibilities where they can inherently exist, right? So therefore, this particular verse is to refute the position, a kind of inherent, intrinsic kind of assumption that we have that aggregates in the phenomenal world inherently exists in 3 times, right? So therefore, when something ceases to exist, we think that, oh, that went somewhere, right? That particular thing went somewhere. It ceased to exist because it went somewhere to the next, it's to its next kind of entity, right? But here the first verse, the line says, the world does not go out of existence. And so so when the translation is a little different here, but when something ceases to exist, it does not go anywhere, right? Or when something arises in the present moment, it is not the case that it came from somewhere. So there is no going and there is no coming, as the expression that we are used to, right? So when something takes kind of birth here, it is not the case that that thing, came from somewhere else, right? So therefore, there is no going into the future, no coming from the past, right? And then the next possibility is that, but things must, exist in the present moment, right? Even if briefly, but it must truly exist. And the idea is, the kind of a inherent assumption that we have is that, when we see ourselves breathing, living, or a tree breathing, living, it is actually existing in the present, right? Not knowing that existing simply means a continuous process of arising and ceasing and arising and ceasing, right? So we cannot say that we are actually living in the moment right now, because there is nothing in our psychophysical aggregates stays even briefly in the moment, right? The fact that we are living is actually a complex process, where there are so many kind of factors arising, ceasing, arising, ceasing, including our breath, right? Breathing never kind of, stays briefly even for a moment, right? It's constant. So the process of this continual process creates the illusion of some sort of existing in the present, right? So therefore, this particular verse refutes any kind of claim that phenomena or psychophysical aggregates exist kind of inherently, truly in any of the 3 times. So therefore, this inherent clinging to some sort of intrinsic existence is very strong, right? So that's why some philosophical schools, they thought that if something exists now, it must come from somewhere else. If something will exist in the future, that something that will exist in the future must somehow exist now. Otherwise, it is as if, like something comes from out of nothing, right? So therefore, some schools like Sankhya maintain this absurd philosophical position that the cause and effect are simultaneously present, right? The effect is in its potentiality, right? But they are nonetheless simultaneously present due to this kind of inherent clinging to intrinsic sense of reality. So therefore, in order to explain that everything is in a constant process and causally produced, and our mind is actually imputing the existence, or to the mind, it appears as if there is intrinsically existing phenomena in the 3 times, but that in fact there is no such thing. the Buddha actually taught the Sutra of dependent origination through the example of rice seedlings, right? A field of rice, and where, it seems like that the things are actually existing, but, through a dependently existing phenomena, the appearance of growth actually of rice seedlings come to us, but, actually there is no such thing. So therefore, Madhyamikas still maintain that due to dependence on many causal factors, that things appear to the conceptual mind as if there is some sort of existence from the side of the object. So that appearance to the mind is what is meant by imputation by the conceptual mind. So therefore, I'm going to read the rest of this particular verse. It does not remain for even an instance. It is a nature beyond three times. So how could it be real? How could the world, how could the psychophysical aggregates be intrinsically real? It is not intrinsically real, that is to say. No.
Sanje dan golden da tu tsache tu temba tu shenda tu temba madu gere ro ko temba madu che tharba temba tu besere inde tai ke yo mardo da tongba ni so tende yong yu do tongba ni le so bo te tu ten du yin se yo ra yang pe ke ba so le tende yong do te ina ko une se tongba ni se re tongba ni se te yang temba tu ba che yo ma de se ga ra o tende kan chi ni ga yang da do se Koroda nyangele deba niga ya yang daba tuba te yo ma rese ra, chikba rese, nesu chikba rese. Kanchi niga yang da tu, do da on da ne me bas. Doa, tarbe lamla doa la soba, koa la soba. Dan doa mambu yor da, o te su kanga shira. Do da on ne me ba, koa la ne ba, nesong la doa ne ba, tumba seru, tarbe lamla doa seru, tobne ne ba seru, te su kanga sumbi yor da. Kanchi niga yangda to roda onda ne ba la soba, kwa ne ba la soba, ro nyangde tarwa la ne ba la soba. Tuzu kanga, tuan tambar yo ma re rangu ne truba chi yo ma re se gara, ne me ba. Ti chirin jikden nyangen de tuan to kebar chita bo, jikden be kwa dang. Ane nyangen de ba, jikden len de be, nyangen len de ba la soba, tuzu la rangu ne truba trubi kebar, chitar te yo ma re se. Che tamje rangshin ki matu rangu ne matu ba se. Tanda te ta tongba ni se te tanda chikbarwa kangal ko chikko ne kangal ko en de sira. Chidar kyo je dagen do shin ne sheba te shin ko la lo char cha sung do. Tambo soso samu ta na ti ko de ra chi ora. Soso de kar re se ar chira. Te pumbu nga ta ne che sa chu me lo gin chong ala so ba te sun de de ro choba yo re. Choba le te ne pa ta bo ma to chi Chirubata Shanta Tukta Devanashi Kogana Tobachi Shu Dangerche Takpa Tirsu to Dange Tata Tekelengo Mara Nambe. Sanko Titu Nyongeche Yoni or Bako Penetrani Titu Nyongeche Yodera or Ti Indico Carese, Tene Taba Sambres, Tension Debar Juarez. Tas Pass Ming Tagre, Sosoge Soso Soboda Tesoletene, O Matiri Tebudo, Tiriteomedo, Samson Samblers Kugra, Chilipa. Second one, don't number second one, did is a chili to Saskaya Mara. Tashi Garrison did is a Laban in Chuja and in the Shashar. The Tashi is Tasha, Jurmato, Lakwatashi Mara. Not the members it was your take your mardo. So could take on the cheaper, Tal Shabanashi. Cantine Chizuki Pato, so Charlie ever such a melon with Joada Kanga. Did some read that Mara, Juju comes to Sungua. Otina Sikibusami Chuma Mimilume Namgame Namshi Mekundi. The Tesola Shendo Yanachi Kora Tata Palana Shingo Seven and Shitendeshe Yomara. Tina Nechili Zuzu Sache Yomara. Tanamdu Dakari, the Chala Tonda Mabu Jira Tanda Tende. Tina Nechili did this number Zuzu Sake Yomara. Tana Timember Shenda Yorba Legacy machine to the Logas Shenda Yorba Sate Yomara. Yiptini Mare. Kanga do it in the Mara or teach it. Then I talk about some. Tension Deborah, then they talk about a chita and it is okay. Her word is a legger, she do anything, chow chebeton, shakuyara. The Kanga is chipara. Really, don't buy your shin that shakun, didn't go over. Shame was it did some shawara. Kanjiniga Yanda don't draw down the name ever. Teaching Jidan Yang and that tondo. Kebachitabo, Kebario Mare, Tarwa Tamje, Kembene Chotamje, Rangune Madruba, Rangshingi Madruba. Rangone Madruba. Kurang wene tsuke yo mare. Kurang mainge mambushil ten tane, kurang sha kongresati to. Oh, yete. Yate chituna, mangdasa.
So then, verse number 64. Verse 64. Ultimately, the world and nirvana do not come into existence, nor do they go out of existence, nor do they remain existent. So the world and the nirvana, from the point of view of ultimate reality, they are exactly the same in terms of having no intrinsic existence, no true arising, no true cessation, no true abidance in terms of past, future, and present. So this is to basically remind us that, when we say that, things do not have inherent existence, some philosophical schools, some individuals, they think that, oh, there are categories of phenomena. Some phenomena are ultimately existent, such as nirvana, such as state of cessation, such as emptiness, right? They must truly exist, right? And other phenomena like table and so forth, they do not inherently exist. They inherently wanted to make this distinction. In fact, we have scholars, Tibetan scholars as well, who maintain that, right? Who maintain that, nirvana does truly exist, emptiness does truly exist, right? So therefore, this is to basically emphasize that from the point of view of ultimate reality, there is no distinction whatsoever between these two, between the world and between nirvana, that they do not inherently exist. They do not inherently exist. So that's why, in the sutras, we talk about the emptiness of the emptiness, right? To basically eliminate this particular clinging that emptiness must truly exist. So therefore, these kind of mention of emptiness and so forth, right? And so therefore, all phenomena, whether in samsara or nirvana, they are kind of such that they are conceptually, only as a conceptual label, only as a conceptual imputation based on many parts or many moments, as may be the case, does exist, right? But apart from this conceptual imputation or appearance to the conceptual mind, things do not inherently exist independently from the side of the object themselves. So therefore, if we are able to establish the emptiness of one phenomena, then we can establish the phenomena or establish the emptiness of all phenomena, because it applies to every phenomena of samsara and nirvana. So, for example, usually the easier method to establish emptiness is emptiness of one's own personal self, right? We say, okay, we have a sense of self. Of course, that's undeniably the case. We cannot say that I don't have a sense of not just self, but intrinsically existent self, right? So that is undeniable, right? But then if it is the case that this phenomenological experience of intrinsically existent self is true, then it must be found on the basis of the ground of which we think the self exists, in which we think the self exists, right? Basically in these 5 psychophysical aggregates. So then, when we analyze, we realize that the kind of sense of self that we have is not any of the 5 psychophysical aggregates. It is not it is not a form, it is not the feeling, it is not discrimination, it is not compositional actions, nor is it consciousness, right? So then if none of the basis of designation is the self, then how do we account for the experience of the self? That is the question, right? So if none of the psychophysical aggregates, the only 5 possibilities in which we can say this is the self is not the self, then how do we actually experience self? Self does exist, right? Because we can testify that through our own experience. We have a distinctive sense of self. So if any of the 5 psychophysical aggregates are not the self, then how do we account for a kind of experience of personal self? So according to Nagarjuna, according to Madhyamaka logic, when any of the 5 psychophysical aggregates appear to the conceptual mind, then we generate we inherently kind of generates a sense of self based on those 5 psychophysical aggregates. So based on our experience of the aggregates, 5 psychophysical aggregates, the notion of a self appears, and that appearance of the self is something that appears to the conceptual mind, and that is what we mean by imputed conceptually, imputed by the conceptual mind, right? So therefore, yes, self does exist, not from the side of the objects, not from the psychophysical aggregates, but as something that is conceptually designated, conceptually labeled by our conceptual mind based on any of the 5 psychophysical aggregates. So it simply means that if we would try to locate a real self in any of the 5 psychophysical aggregates, we cannot actually kind of pinpoint to one or point to one and say, hey, this is the self, right? Or mind is the self, or the body is the self, right? So therefore, when we, this is how our convention works. When we look at somebody, hey, this is Tashi, or this is John, right? We like point to a part of his body, right? Maybe at the hand or something like that, right? This is Tashi, yeah. It's a conceptual labeling, right? But, we really cannot point to the essential of Tashi or essential John in any of the physical parts or in any of the 5 psychophysical aggregates. So therefore, this is what is kind of also maintained by Nagarjuna. Or this is also taught by Shantideva when he says that, a person is not earth, no water, no fire, no wind, no space, no consciousness, right? A person is conceptual designation based on these aggregates, based on these constituents, right? So therefore, even as in a kind of ultimate exploration for something that inherently exists, we cannot point to a self. The self does not exist, therefore, from the side of the objects, right? But we can't deny the existence of a self. Experience tells us there's a self. Also, the functionality of the self, right? We become sad, we can do things, we experience all sort of feelings, that testifies to the existence of a self. So what is that self? It's a interdependently arising constituents based on which conceptual label of self is labeled or appeals to the conceptual mind. So therefore, a kind of the motion of a self appeals to the conceptual mind based on the basis of designation. So therefore, based on composition of many aggregates, the conceptual mind categorizes it or labels it as something. So only in that sense things exist. So if we understand the selflessness of phenomena of a person in this sense, we can also infer it to any kind of phenomena, whether in samsara or in nirvana.
No. Yeah, that's in the college. Oh, that did it. To refuting a match, it in a match, Chiruba, the Bakashakagua. Chiruban the Bakashakagua. That Ambuta Cargo to Sune. Chitabe and to tend it up by yes. Or to tend me talk about that the calendar. Nekaji Tambutangi, but somebody she could never that. No, touch it, Kamabu, you would have some Givara. Or Tesson the Konga to talk about killing you, tell you today. Gaba the mom, but the Kivata, the Kachika Omare. To talk about yes, Chami yes, to talk about Chami yes. Or today, the other thing about the shade or talk about the Chitabarwa. No time to Kinji Cheba Kalim, Kinji Cheba Kalan, I can't do Yungu. Koja net in a range to talk about killing you, students, the toilet can't do the young mothers. Tis on the Obanamlia, and a nigger Tapaka Wachigora. Take your channel over to to Tachimbo with a chonjo with a kanga yungura. Jichidu, Zambulu Kora to Chigrashira. Yachurdana chonju to Damadayora. Oh, this is how much Tapaka. Oh, Nicare. Over Namliane, to tend to the joy or at a Yomares, Kitchidua. Oh, to that teacher today. Get it out to Jurna, joy you don't miss Tigora. Thank you, Rayana Nesavara. Oh, Tinica, to say,
Cesare.
ah,
Oh, tukchu renga di chewa, tukchu doro gil doro wa.
you could never do something.
Ale lus.
I said, never measure it, Kawata. Gagbayanda, Nimina.
Lus.
Oh, I done never done. Gagwata to Kalashes. Love good way.
Oh, this lus.
Dick,
Lus.
do that. Kawatan and never done Gagba, they don't do Rashing to Bayoma Resa. Gagba turned to Kalashes in Rosare.
Lus. No.
There's it. Then it taught on the Dirita. Don't Dirita. To ten, teaching my mind, Takba. Segura, the mind, but Tassiwara. Get it, and then Negam thought of Jurnani, Jurashi. That is it. Get it thought of Jurnani. She did catch your mind. Go thought on Jura, your mother, you thought on Jura, engage it, Joy engage it, Segura. Get it thought on Jura, you engage in any case you might have Segura. She did catch my mind, catching them over you with Segura. Joy, you know. Getting Jura men on it. Don't do shiny color Jurse. I get it Jura meva in a sidwa. Get it negam Jura men on it. Don't do any Ranshinji Trubali up and a pen consultation of Sopolitan, Shunuri, Chibare, Kengore, so what in day Kabati Gumares or whatever, Sopuchane. So what they call to Rachiro to Chiradice. Think you want to do any Shunudai during the Kabata today, Gura? Ranshinji Chibale, Tambu Chibache, Tene Shunuche, Tene Kabala Soba Shenito, Yurgumare Segura. Edidwa, get it out of Jura Yena, out of Jura Mengation, etc. tene chidari kechi mayimba she tato juwa meba yinane, ane kete juwa mena ne, tando shenye kala jor, kansa tabu te lu la tene, ane chiba ta shunu doa keba la soba, lu jundu doa te juwa dukumarwa sigara. Ne tishin nasa la soba tezo kanga juwa tishin tezo le tene juwa yuwa marwa sigara, tezo kanga juwa degara. Oh, did yeah, this one, did
So the earlier explanation also included verse number 65, which I'm just going to read. Since abiding does not really occur, ultimately there is neither arising nor cessation. How can something be ultimately produced or ceased or abide in that sense? So that was explained earlier by Geshe. So now verse number 66. From here, Nagarjuna engages in refutation of position of some of the realist philosophical schools. The first is here by the Vishishka school of philosophy, non-Buddhist philosophical school, who maintains that, if you who kind of response to the Madhyamikas by saying that if you maintain that things are constantly changing, things arise into existence, things go out of existence, and so forth, then all the philosophical kind of refutations that you launched against us, they're all valid, right? But this particular fault does not uh, 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 involve us, because we maintain that the subtlest particles are actually permanent. Not only the particles, subtlest particles are permanent, but they are also indivisible. They can never be further divided, right? So this is basically the refutation of such a philosophical position, right? So Nagarjuna begins by saying, so how about that kind of this indivisible particle that you're talking about, right? Is it eternally in change? Is it eternally transforming? So if it is eternally transforming, how can you say that it is not momentary, right? But on the other hand, if you say that this subtlest, particle, indivisible particle, but momentarily, indivisible particle, does it actually momentarily, in the moment, momentarily change or not, right? Ultimately indivisible, but momentarily does it change or not, right? If you say that even there is no momentary change as well, then how can they be change or transformation in the objects, right? We can look at a person is born, right? And then becomes a teenager, and then eventually becomes old and so forth, right? If there is no even temporary change at all, then such transformation is impossible. So if always changing, how could things be non-momentary? If they did not change, how could they be altered in fact?
you?
No.
Oh yeah, that did is do, and then shunu da kebala so what in the major tasigora. Ne nega tamje ko tirsu bachis, tirsu tade. Takba yene ko tirsu yengwa. Tambu kande ne niba tagaran de ko echikora. Teresa. Mujhe kisi Teresa. Tirsu sera. Tambu kare ne ko tagaran de niba til tagaran de gora. Tirsu basera. Takba tirsu chibaris. Takbe mingle tirsu du yore. Ngama na shi chima de tirsu sera. Oh, di Genshin la soba tende gyure yung mare sobo chanero. 가르스는 꼭 딜수로 와서 담부감 다 되리라 했어요. 진디버체. 다드네 어디지 랍시는 디마다.
Therefore, the Nagarjuna's argument is that if in fact things are not changing, whatever does not change entails that they remain exactly the same at all times, right? So then how can there be any transition or transformation that we see, like a baby becoming old, right? Such kind of observation or perception of phenomena will contradict your idea that things will not change at all.
뭐야? 어디라? 어디시다 다코비. 뒷견도세. 담미다 방에서는 가서를 또서 요도 띠마도다. 뒤전실로 야가 군가 강가 매우 차그라. 실로 지신 나서라 서보다 강가는 요도 무슨 통대라. 뒤도 가서라. 어디라다 지금 두삼백이라. 니바테 이제네 지금도 그랑신기 주베 딱과 참했던데 말에 요도 시고래서 요요스나스고라. 계지 말아서 배 요요도 세나. 근데 다 그냥 요도 초지 감네 탐제도 세배 계지 주잖아. 아니 거라. 맨다와니 미미셔. 되는 미가 중대미. 다 초지 감네 탐제도 서도 다 주제 딱배 내갑들이야로 미다바르 켈린 바타나스레 초지디 초지감 때로 에네 초직 세벤 유란되고하다 차탐제네 그 유라시는 아마도 심한 매가시네 유아시는 두기에서라 탐제기 요바만 두기에서 초지감네 탐제도 세배 아마도 세네 유르야 되시기다 세배 깨진 유타나서 저한테 유라이에서나 네 초질린 유라이버스그다 초 탐제네 고 유한도네 나만나시 마대비세 세바 치마치마 겨들시기니세 디케치티거라 규타나세 네 메다와니 마미셔 데남 니가 르네 미세 메다와니 마미셔세 그네티디로 뭐뭐 남라 탐제인으로 계시 나바니서 디 남바니서 전에 지금 말해서라 탐제를 세배 계신 주잖아 니가 르바다 되게 말해서 켈레토 말해서 가르스나 뭐뭐 남 치르기 치르 로스 줄바다 체가르 니팅이도 내봐 맨다와 텐다 아텐디도 뭐부터서 간가 카시에는 게 많아신 내지 되게 카시에는 게 많아신 마들 유두게 근데 니 요한테 되게 말이셔라 유라연에 참절을 유라여고 그래서 찍바인고 그래서 그래서다 저는 초지감 탐제도 누가 가려했으나 대니가 견하전에 되게 말이셔라 그래서는 유다나 맨자와니 미미셔 네 대남이가 증개메스 그래 뭐 가셔리아네 유라여샤 처럼 가셔리 유라메고 때부터 니가 되고 말이셔라 누가 연한 거 본데 이제 교단 경우 좀 탐지를 유아여 그래 누가 매는 지 가셔 누가 매우지 때요 말때 교단 경우 유아도 그래 뒤 초질이 유라여 초질이 유라메스 때데 되고 말이셔 남바 탐지도 거 간데지나 계산 니네 지배랑 시청 유래랑 시청 깨고래 시대식도 야 된대도
So then the Visheshkas understand that there is some sort of contradiction that they see in their philosophical position that the subtlest particles are permanent and indivisible, right? Because if that is the case, then they cannot explain a kind of seeds giving rise to trees and entire forests. They cannot account for change in the seasons, right? And so forth. All the kind of transformation, change that we observe in the world, they cannot explain that, right? They see that. So therefore, they wanted to say that that even though particles are permanent, but we can see the change because some of them have some sort of momentary transition, momentary change, right? So that's why that is the case. So therefore, in to that, the response from Nagarjuna is, when you say, there is some sort of momentary change with regard to these permanent particles, what do you mean by that? Do you mean, I guess, a kind of particle, subtlest particle, indivisible particle? And do the particles change entirely? That those particles that you say they are changing, or that part of the particles, a part of a particle undergoes change while other part do not actually change? What do you mean by that, right? So therefore, says Nagarjuna further says that, but the position that, um, this position is, not tenable to maintain that, particles go partial change or particles go complete change or transformation, right? Because when you look at the particles, we don't observe that, we don't see that, we cannot see that possibility, right? Uh, mm, if something is momentary because it either ceases partially or entirely, neither of these two possibilities make sense because a difference is not perceived. So, like a kind of a partial transformation or complete transformation, right? That is basically is something, a kind of possibility that we cannot entertain.
This one.
Because, any particle, any phenomena, if we look at, we cannot say, oh, these aspects of the particle did not change while these aspects of the particle changed. We don't observe that.
This one.
No.
We are tending to that in the Coruscado. Geshe Yena, all the tomato local. Diane Desidua, Camju Bag, Sigua, Camju Kelling, Chirubayora, or the Abdutene, Gassere, Camju de Saturday, the Toma Mevane, Yebe giving Bachi in Sura, Ranshinki Negabla, Tati Nipateta Yoma Rese, when Bakun Jomenge, Kansa Yene and Kotawara. Goja Camju ne Tonda, Toma Dias Yon, Toma Dias, Toyake Omar. Toma mebane yotenge kibu kansa ani ningba chi isere. Ningba imbe rangshin ki nega la tabe nyeba te dambe dos kichin jurgurbe ti chachin jurgurbe jugmara tende tende omare sangazu kibu ningba taba rangshin ki kibu tende khele ki yosera. Oh ta telpa ne lawina telpa di wotige kapa chiktoa. Oh kande chikdo sena. Kichi mena real me service. Kechi mena real me service. Ngoba yena kechi ma yin ku gurese. Kechi ma yena rang trube tule tu nibal ya tawana me gurese. Rilbu me gurese si te yo mare sora. Kechi tangbo te nibal te yo marwa. Tangbo nibal te yo ma. Nibal korang ya saba ya kibu kigi wara. Kechi yena real me service. Kechi ma yin chinche tele kechi tangbo rang trube ki kechi nibal me dure. Tangbo te nibal te go marwa. Tambo de nibal degi yunade ni sumbalete, shibalete, ngabalete. Ni nga zo tserin buchawara, buku chunchu diko, kati yune tagate niba sumba shibalte rochena. Yune ko shumba janchi tegira. Kechi yuna ril mechir, kechi yuna rang tudu ki kechi nibal ya, tambo di tsawane chazan beba chawara sigawara. Tambo di sigawara. Kechi yuna ril mechir, yune tisi Toma Uta Kuse. Ne Toma da Kasere. Toma da Uta Tamala Soba, attend the Yoku Reswara. Getting Magina. kechi ma yin go la kechi ma yin na ra tu 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 ni ba me tu ba yin be ni nga du na ye ngo bu de chi du na cha sa me go re se ra ti de ko ning ba cha ye ke yo ma re se ra ning ba ga ya ta ka le shi yo ma re se ra ning ba cha ye yo ma re se ka re se sa sa re se ra ki we cha ni sa re se ra ni te ne ning ba ga shi ning ba ga yo ma re se ke de tem be ngo bu tembe ngobu yimbe chane ne keji ma yina tembo tagba dengen keji gyo dunge tende ngumaro ngadu na nebe ngobu chiga neba ngaya ane me ta te ngobu nyimba chayese ke yo mare sara nyimbare jogero keji ngobu tamje nebe nyimba ngaya takala shi yote nyingba la jure chabes nyingba te o mare ko kechi chana ko sawa se tera nyingba sen kechi tambo de nibal te sumbal te na ni nyingba re chando ra ajo nyingba chaya te ko nyingba sonza sawa chabi ve tarwa sawa ki me ni nyingba ko ro chik marwa tala de ni nyingba na thanga de ne na ko cha de na ko kechi tambo de nibal te me sa ko nyingba chando ra nyingba se ga ra tanga je gyunde ko tinte teza chandora. Pisawa de tambo de niba le tegu na ni nimba kona yo ay kore yo mara. Isi rande do ko so. Keji na ril me chere ane tishi tonda u tagwe toma dere u dere ki dere se tinte tagwe che me be so chandu me do. Ane kare to tenjere keji ina ya nimba ngada kala shese. 또 tempo ina ni nyingba di yonga yonga siga. Kete tembe ngobo ina, tembe ngobo yin kechi ma yinbe ne, tuna nebe ngobo chiga nebe, tambo yonga di chima neba di yongu ma, te sunda nyingba yonga yonga rese. Nyingba takala shi ito yonga rese gira. Ida,
No.
ishinga utaku yose, tenchiri kechi ina ya, nyingba gada kala shi se. Oh, ina ko tenchiri kechi ina yang se o tene kechi ma ina ya ko siba de niba de le ndo saba le gu na tele nyingba se ma de sera tambu se niba de te o mara tidu chi du yo do o te so tenchiri kechi ina yang o nyingba gada kala shi se ko tembo che de ge ne ni nyingba ra cha ya chi wara te ge o mara kechi tambu niba so che saba chi go ra te so chana de nyingba se ba ra se kechi jena ko na tambu saba chi ge cha ra ma to nyingba chi o mara kengo de ngema ne yo ba ina kengo de tambu ki du ne yo ba she kengo she internet de ina ne ko nyingba ta ga te su ru cha cho ra ti ko saba chi ge che ne kengo cha do ra de me do this one yeah
Yes.
akala shi de yo ba ma no sense oh yeah.
So then verse number 68 is basically a position that is maintained by followers of Vishnu, who wanted to explain that, there has to be something that is source of everything, that is permanent, right? That is eternally true, enduring, right? And they say that there is such a person, there is such an old person, and namely Vishnu, right? The God, the creator, uh, uh, because they say that Vishnu is extremely old person, the first in the universe, and also someone who self-originated, Swambhu, right? And old, right? And so therefore, they wanted to maintain this Vishnu as old, primordial, right? No beginning, no end, right? Not caused by anything, self-originating, and so forth, right? So as a counter example to the Buddhist kind of logic that and everything is momentary. So to them, then Nagarjuna says, um, if Vishnu is the actual entity, right, as opposed to kind of non-entity, something that does not exist. If Vishnu is something that actually exists, is an existing entity, then it should be momentary, right? If a real thing is momentary, then it would cease to exist entirely at each moment. So if it's an entity, causally produced entity, then it will cease to exist in the moment. The definition of momentariness or causally produced phenomena is such that in its in the subsequent moment of it arising, it has to undergo complete transformation, right? So therefore, mm, so therefore, if that is the case, how can we say that Vishnu is old? Vishnu, by definition, if Vishnu does exist, it's transforming on a moment-to-moment basis. How can Vishnu be old, right? That old. How can Vishnu be primordial, so to speak? But if you say that, even though Vishnu is, momentary, but because it's Vishnu is stable, firm, enduring, right? And so in that case, we say that he's old, right? The same logical flow applies. And basically, even though something is enduring and, firm, right? If that something is momentary, how can that something be old? It still means that even though that person might have been in existence for a long time as a continuum, but the reality is that at each moment there is a complete transformation, right? So the idea of the old is like, if you say an old person has always been old, yeah, then that is eternal old, right? But, there is no such a kind of old person that, was old at all times, right? Without any transition. An old person is young ones and became old. Similarly, even though Vishnu may be enduring, but nonetheless, because he is momentary, there is no such thing as old or primordial or unchanging.
그래서
No.
뭐야, 어떤 데 당하냐. 다양 그 사과를 시도. 어디 시래. 계지라 그래서 계지마에 나 시시했던 거 계지 소시 쳐봤던 거. 어디 시인데도 시대탄데 치 이거지. 계지마라 다티 차제기 켜봤던 것이. 계지마에 차제 연구를 저 차제도 참여해서 저거라. 어디는 계지마에는 꼭 차제 연구를 하지다. 다그 가르쳐도서나 계지마에 차제 연구를 해서 들려. 계지마에 깨라 망가봐 등이라 깨사르세 망가봐 등이 뒤니바를 메데베 메다바 일하스다 그 켈렘베까지다 주어침베까지래. 좋아. 계지마 레샤스라. 내 계지마 깨라 망가봐 등이 당부 깨사르세 가 메버데 계지 당부로와 등이 뒤니바 메데베 뒤대그 말에 그 메다바 인스체라다. 메다바 인라스. 이나 계지 등이 계지 지그랑 신기 never ranking tuba radio rase ta ko ranking tuba de togu yorata da kechi meta bada re kechi chi ke chatu ti Nibale take me do some good. Then I can't do Tora, Riba Yandara, Taras Labio Mara. Teach Nibal take my Niba take the Tambu Kesa, the Niba then, and somebody take, she will take pay then. You was under Jimmy Chandura. The Conjuran do don't Tambu Niba take me do said. Diana Kitchen in Dugas, there, Tambu Niba Sumbase. The Ramuni to a day, she to a day to us, 2 years ago. Mitaba Kalam Bashe, Inaya, Kichi Koran de Ranshiki, never Senase, Tatil Paka Wachido, Kaji Lavian Deva teacher. Tatil Paka Sedosana. Kichi Maina Rangi Chashe Yogura, Chashe Yuna, Chita Yobatation to any Toma de Uda, Barbaya Kelly Kugresera. Chidare Kichi Tayoba, Kichi Tambo da Kichi Tambo Niba Kichi Korale Chasher Chia Yogura, Tambo da Barbada Ushe Chasher Chia Yogure Sera. Oh, Kichi Marangi Chasher Jube, Chida da Umata Parta in the Kelly Gure Sera. And it Chida Yobatation to go Homa de Yogure and Ude Yogure Sera. Chidare Kichi Tayoba, Jide Kichi Neba, Parde Yogure, Tamade Yogure Sera. Chidara Kechi Lia, and the Uyabashin to Taya Yogore, and it Kia Yogore, Bama Yog, Chama Yogore Sera. Chida Kechi Neba me, Tisha Kechi, Sum Dasher, Chida Kechi Neba, Minsa, Odan Dimida. Teda Kechi Marangi Chashes Jube, Kechi Tonda Barsum Uche Yogore Ese. Dana Chida Yobashindo Tambo Yogoro Uyogore Chetidua. Chida Kechi Tayoba, Jude, Kechi Neba Yogore, and Tamade Yogores. Tishir Kechi Sumdani, Kechi Maine, Kechi Korala, Tambo, Parda, Tamache, Kechi Sumgitangi to Nekore, Sera, Nuchi. Chida Kechi Neba Mese, or to Ne Shami. Teta Nuchu Genji, then de Kechi Ranshingi, Nebam, Tati Pa Kawachidua, Telpa Ranlu Kawachi Sere. Tichir Kechi Sumta Sere, Chiden Kechi never mess, Ranshin to be never mess. Kechi Sumgitangi, the Kechi Tambu Ranshingi to be Suki Negato Ase, Laurwate, Kechi Ranshingi to be never Suki Yomares, Karas and Kechi Koran Chasum Yores. Chasumla tene kechi masachita gora, Nimu sera, Dawa sera, Sama sera, Chuzuchi se, Chuzuni se, Kelba sera, Kechi la Mambuyora, Kechi la Rindu Mambuyora, Oti Indutan Kokasure, Kechi Lia, Kechi Chi de Rangune Tuba de Tegmares, Rangune Tuba in a call Chasha Mengenji, Koranchik, Kechi Tambo Deres, Chikanjaji, thank you, Yogureti, Yomaresidua. Chida da Uda Tala Soba to Yogures. Chame Yangobo, Missibese. Chame Bangobo Yomaton, the Umabana Shichigna. Chacha da Chame Niche, Chame Shichal Missira. Chata Jeba in a Koroba Kashing the Tone, Jimmy Togura. Koran Chachi Mange to the Chamination Robachi, Magochi, and I Ramone to Baseshogara. Koran Shingi Korachi to it. The Demo Konasigi Mare. Chakashi Yogeshimado. Chakashi in the Teleton Pachi Tasha. What there is. Chamidungo Missibesere. Nuju Genji then the Tamje. In a Keji Giran, Shinki never your mares. Cars the Rang Chashes with Jube, Ungo Sumregilatenepa, Tukuyores or Chashes with Jube, Keji, Sumgitanich and the Tukures. What is Lamnadira? As you Kechi Tayo Banchi, then Kechi, the Tachasum Yokurese. Chasum Yubetani Deliane, Kechi Rangune Tubate, Rangshinki to never the Ungumares. Tatonda Chacha Yangura, Chacha in a Rangune to Ungumares. Chacha Yogur the Koran Keji Sum Yores. Yeah, teach you learn.
Also, verse number 69 is followers Vishnu and other realist philosophical schools, coming back to Madhyamikas by kind of thinking that, yes, if we say that, things are not changing at all, things are not momentary, then, there are a lot of consequences, a lot of philosophical contradictions. We couldn't account for change. We couldn't account for growth in the universe, forest, season change, and so forth, right? Old age, and so forth, right? We couldn't explain them, right? So therefore, they wanted to maintain that they still wanted to cling to a notion of something that intrinsically exists, inherently exists. And so now they're saying that, yes, things are momentary, right? But a moment truly exists, right? Just as they wanted to resort to the indivisible particle as the foundation of the intrinsic reality of phenomenal world, like the kind of the first principle, the ground on which they can build like kind of intrinsically existent phenomenal world, or resorting to indivisible particle, they now wanted to also resort to a kind of an indivisible moment, right? There is momentary change, yes, we agree, but a moment is something that is indivisible. A moment is something that inherently truly exists. So therefore, we can maintain that things truly exist in a moment. So there is a momentarily true existing phenomena, because things truly exist for a moment. They arise in the moment, and then they change in the next moment. But a moment is something that is not imputed. A moment is something that truly exists. A moment is indivisible, right? So if they can maintain this position, then they can somewhat maintain a kind of a plausible argument that there is still, even though things are momentarily changing, there is still like intrinsic reality. Still like, intrinsic reality in and out of themselves, on the objects themselves, without a conceptual kind of influence or conceptual imputation or labeling, right? So, so the response is a moment, is not indivisible. A moment can further be divided into three moments. For example, a moment has a beginning, a moment has a middle, and therefore a moment has an end. And so therefore, that idea that a moment is intrinsically real without any further division possible is false, because a moment can be divided into further moments, more subtle moments. A moment has a beginning, a moment has a middle, a moment has an end, right? So therefore, a moment is also imputed based on a continuum. Any kind of moment is also imputed based on a continuum that is further divisible into its beginning, its middle, and its end, right? And so therefore, because a moment is also an embodiment of having three parts, we cannot say that the world or the aggregate truly inherently exist in an inherently existing moment. So that's verse number 69. Yeah.
뭐야, 고기입니다. 어디다 토마 의당
Dit også.
그래. 오야, 안 해도 빌럽시니 겁니다. 우리 안 되셔서나
Okay.
아다 셔서나 주주 줘서
Yes. So
우리 다다
we're going to stop here due to time.
주주 그 줘서 어디
Verse number 69.
Yeah. Oh, this.
Thank you again, Rinpoche, for these precious teachings, especially on the wheel turning day.
Oh.
And thank
Very
you,
조금
Dr. Tenzin.
Regular chocolate to your wrist.
Ah.
Three chocolate to your wrist.
Oh, yeah.
Would you say?
Oh, that's the level.
Tashidele. And thank you, Dr. Tenzin Muchung, for filling in for the last 3 weeks. We so appreciate your beautiful translations and really appreciate you stepping in and helping us. So please join us again next Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And since this is Dr. Wuchung's last translation, you'll find information in the chat box of how you may make an offering of thanks for his translations. Thank you so much. And we'll end with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Gururana Mandala Kamniryatayami. Due to this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends.
Oh, yeah. What